The annual family financial review meeting was supposed to be routine. Mom had instituted these gatherings 3 years ago after Dad's retirement, claiming they promoted family financial transparency and mutual support. What they actually promoted was judgment, comparison, and unsolicited advice from relatives who barely managed their own budgets. This year's meeting carried extra significance because my sister Rachel had recently completed her MBA from Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. She'd been dropping hints about her newfound financial expertise for months, suggesting that family members could benefit from professional-grade portfolio optimization strategies. Rachel's presentation today will focus on investment diversification and risk management, Mom announced proudly as we gathered around the dining room table. She's identified several opportunities for family wealth enhancement. Dad beamed at Rachel's academic achievement. 27 years old and already thinking like a financial advisor. We're so proud of her analytical capabilities. My younger brother Marcus, fresh out of college and working his first entry-level marketing job, nodded approvingly. Rachel's always been the smart one with money. Remember how she turned her college work-study job into that profitable tutoring business? The tutoring business had indeed been successful, though Rachel had conveniently forgotten to report most of the cash payments on her taxes. But family mythology rarely concerned itself with such details. Sarah, Mom continued, turning toward me with her characteristic expression of gentle disappointment. Rachel's reviewed everyone's financial situations. She has some suggestions for improving your investment approach. I maintained my calm expression while calculating the implications. My investment account wasn't what my family believed it to be. The $2.1 million portfolio they discovered wasn't the result of lucky stock picks or inheritance. It was a carefully structured federal asset designed to maintain my cover as a Financial Crimes Enforcement Network special agent working deep undercover. For 18 months, I'd been investigating a sophisticated international money laundering operation that moved over $500 million annually through legitimate investment structures. My cover identity as a freelance financial consultant explained both my flexible schedule and apparent investment success, while the protected federal assets maintained credibility with criminal targets who conducted extensive background checks. Rachel's identified several inefficiencies in your portfolio allocation, Dad continued enthusiastically. She can help optimize your returns while reducing unnecessary risk exposure. Rachel smiled confidently, spreading printouts across the table with practiced authority. Sarah, I've analyzed your investment statements from the past 6 months. Your asset allocation strategy lacks sophistication and ignores fundamental risk management principles. Really? I replied mildly. Absolutely. You're overweighted in government securities and defense contractor stocks. These selections demonstrate conservative bias that's limiting your growth potential. What Rachel didn't understand was that those conservative selections were specifically mandated federal instruments designed to maintain my cover while protecting classified operations. The defense contractor positions provided legitimate explanations for my knowledge of international sanctions enforcement, while the government securities supported my cover story's risk profile. I've prepared a comprehensive reallocation proposal, Rachel continued, producing a bound presentation folder. Shifting 60% of your assets into emerging market funds and technology growth stocks will dramatically improve your annual returns. Mom clapped appreciatively. Rachel worked on this analysis for weeks. She's really thinking about family success. The current portfolio shows textbook signs of unsophisticated management, Rachel explained with academic authority. Conservative selections might feel safe, but they're actually increasing long-term risk through inflation exposure and opportunity cost. Marcus leaned forward with interest. What kind of returns improvement are we talking about? Conservative estimates suggest 15 to 20% annual gains versus Sarah's current 7% average, Rachel replied confidently. Over 10 years, that difference compounds to nearly double the portfolio value. The mathematical projections were impressive and completely irrelevant. Federal asset protection protocols didn't permit optimization for personal returns. Every investment decision required approval from Treasury Department supervisors maintaining operational security. Rachel, I said carefully, those calculations assume market conditions remain favorable for growth investments. Market timing concerns reflect outdated investment psychology, Rachel dismissed immediately. Modern portfolio theory demonstrates that diversified growth strategies outperform conservative approaches across all economic cycles. Dad nodded approvingly. Rachel's academic training gives her analytical advantages that emotional decision-making can't match. Exactly, Rachel continued. Sarah, your investment choices reflect emotional attachment to perceived safety rather than mathematical optimization for wealth accumulation. The psychological assessment was both accurate and irrelevant. My emotional attachment was to maintaining operational security, not maximizing personal wealth. But explaining federal asset protection requirements would compromise 18 months of careful undercover work. What specifically do you recommend? I asked. Complete portfolio restructuring, Rachel declared. I've prepared transfer documents that will move your assets into professionally managed funds selected according to modern diversification principles. Mom beamed at Rachel's thoroughness. She's thought of everything. Even the paperwork is ready. The transition can happen immediately, Rachel continued, producing a stack of financial documents. I've already established the target accounts and verified the transfer procedures. We can complete everything today. I studied the paperwork with apparent interest while recognizing the federal crime being proposed. Unauthorized transfers of protected assets carried criminal penalties ranging from 10 to 25 years depending on the amounts involved and potential security compromise. These are very thorough, I observed. Northwestern's finance program emphasized practical application, Rachel replied proudly. Theory without implementation is worthless in real financial management. How did you access my account information for the analysis? I asked conversationally. Your laptop was open last weekend during the family barbecue, Rachel explained matter-of-factly. I took screenshots of your statements while you were helping Dad with the grill. Basic due diligence for any financial restructuring. The casual admission represented multiple federal violations. Unauthorized access to protected financial systems triggered automatic alerts monitored by Treasury Department security protocols. The screenshots Rachel mentioned had already been flagged by federal surveillance algorithms. That was very initiative-driven, I replied. Marcus nodded approvingly. Rachel's always been proactive about family improvement opportunities. The screenshots revealed concerning patterns, Rachel continued, spreading printouts across the table. Sarah, your investment selections suggest risk-aversion psychology that's actually creating long-term financial vulnerability. Such as excessive exposure to government bonds and defense industry stocks. These sectors show limited growth potential compared to technology and emerging market opportunities. What Rachel had identified as risk-aversion psychology was actually operational security, maintaining my cover while protecting classified federal assets. The government bonds provided legitimate income streams that explained my lifestyle, while the defense stocks supported my cover story's professional background. I see your concern, I said diplomatically. More importantly, Rachel continued enthusiastically, I've identified implementation strategies that minimize tax implications while maximizing growth potential. The transfer documents include tax loss harvesting provisions that will actually improve your current year returns. Dad clapped Rachel's shoulder approvingly. This kind of sophisticated thinking is exactly why we invested in her MBA education. Rachel's analysis demonstrates genuine financial acumen, Mom agreed. Sarah, you should feel grateful that someone with professional training is willing to help optimize your investments. The family consensus was touching and legally irrelevant. Federal asset protection systems operated independently of family financial planning, MBA credentials, or optimization theories. When would you like to execute the transfers? I asked. Today if possible, Rachel replied immediately. Market timing suggests that emerging technology funds are currently undervalued. Delaying implementation costs money. I have all the authorization documents ready, she continued, producing another folder. Your digital signature on these forms will initiate the complete portfolio restructuring. I examined the documents with professional interest. Rachel had indeed prepared comprehensive transfer paperwork, comprehensive enough to constitute prima facie evidence of premeditated federal financial crimes. This is very detailed work, I observed. MBA programs emphasize thorough preparation, Rachel replied proudly. Successful financial management requires documentation that anticipates every contingency. What Rachel hadn't anticipated was that Treasury Department algorithms monitored protected accounts for precisely these kinds of unauthorized access patterns. The screenshots, the analysis, and the preparation of transfer documents had triggered multiple federal alert systems. "Dad, what do you think about Rachel's recommendations?" I asked. "Brilliant financial strategy," Dad declared immediately. "Rachel understands investment principles that most professionals never master. Sarah, you'd be foolish not to accept this kind of expert guidance." The MBA curriculum included advanced courses in family wealth management, Rachel added. "I specifically studied strategies for optimizing related party investment coordination." Mom nodded approvingly. Rachel's education benefits the entire family. We're so fortunate to have professional-level expertise available for family financial decisions. "Marcus, do you have thoughts about portfolio restructuring?" I continued. "Rachel knows way more about finance than I do," Marcus replied immediately. "If she says these changes will improve returns, I believe her academic analysis over emotional decision-making." The family consensus was remarkably unanimous and completely irrelevant to federal asset protection protocols. "Rachel," I said carefully, "have you considered that some investment accounts might have special restrictions or monitoring requirements?" "All investment accounts are subject to standard SEC oversight," Rachel dismissed confidently. "Nothing in your portfolio suggests unusual regulatory constraints. These are basic publicly traded securities." The confidence was both impressive and incorrect. My portfolio's mundane appearance was specifically designed to avoid attention while maintaining federal protection requirements that extended far beyond standard SEC oversight. What if there were additional regulatory considerations? I asked hypothetically. "Like what?" Rachel challenged. "You're a freelance financial consultant, not a government employee or insider trading target. Standard investment rules apply to your situation." "I suppose you're right," I replied. Dad smiled approvingly. "Sarah, accepting Rachel's guidance demonstrates real family loyalty. Too often, pride prevents people from benefiting from superior expertise." "Exactly," Rachel agreed. "Emotional attachment to current investments reflects psychological biases that professional training helps identify and overcome." "When you put it that way," I said, reaching for the documents, "your recommendations make perfect sense." Rachel beamed as I examined the transfer authorizations. Northwestern's program emphasized implementation speed as a key factor in successful wealth management. Markets reward decisive action. "These documents authorize complete portfolio liquidation and reallocation according to your specifications?" I asked. "Correct. Everything transfers into professionally managed growth funds selected according to modern portfolio theory," Rachel confirmed. "And you're confident this approach will optimize returns while managing risk appropriately?" "Absolutely. Academic research consistently demonstrates superiority of diversified growth strategies over conservative approaches," Rachel replied with MBA confidence. "Well then," I said, setting down the documents and signed, "I suppose we'll see how modern portfolio theory handles federal asset protection violations." "What do you mean?" Rachel asked, her confidence faltering slightly. "Rachel, those screenshots you took last weekend triggered automatic alerts in Treasury Department monitoring systems. The investment account you want to restructure isn't my personal portfolio. It's a protected federal asset maintaining my cover identity." The dining room went completely silent. "You're what?" Mom whispered. "I'm a special agent with the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. I've been working undercover for 18 months investigating international money laundering operations. The investment portfolio you've analyzed is a federal asset designed to maintain my cover while protecting classified operations." Dad's face went pale. "Sarah, that's not possible. You're a freelance financial consultant." "That's my cover identity. My actual job involves infiltrating criminal organizations that move hundreds of millions in illegal proceeds through legitimate investment structures." Rachel stared at the transfer documents in horror. But these are just standard investment accounts." "No, Rachel. Those are protected federal assets monitored by Treasury Department security systems. Your unauthorized access, analysis and preparation of transfer documents constitute multiple federal crimes. Oh my God, Marcus breathed. The screenshots you took triggered alerts monitored by federal agents. The transfer documents you prepared provide evidence of premeditated financial crimes. And your MBA credentials won't help when Treasury investigators review your actions. Rachel's hands shook as she looked at the paperwork. I didn't know. We never would have. Federal asset protection systems don't recognize family exceptions or educational credentials, I continued calmly. Unauthorized access is unauthorized access regardless of intentions or MBA training. Mom started crying softly. Sarah, can you explain to them that this was a misunderstanding? Mom, I'm an undercover federal agent whose operational security was potentially compromised by Rachel's actions. My personal feelings don't override national security protocols. But we're family. Dad protested. And Rachel committed federal crimes that could compromise investigations targeting international criminal organizations. Family relationships don't supersede Treasury Department security requirements. Rachel looked nauseated. What kind of penalties are we talking about? Computer fraud, identity theft, and violations of federal asset protection statutes. Potentially 10 to 25 years depending on prosecution decisions and security damage assessments. 25 years? Rachel whispered. Federal sentencing guidelines don't consider MBA credentials or family relationships as mitigating factors, I replied. The dining room remained silent except for Mom's quiet crying. Sarah, Dad said finally, what happens now? Treasury investigators will review Rachel's actions and determine appropriate criminal charges. The comprehensive documentation she prepared will serve as evidence of premeditated criminal intent. Can you help her? Can you explain that this was family financial planning? Mom pleaded. Mom, I'm an undercover federal agent sworn to protect national security assets from unauthorized access. Those obligations don't have family exceptions. Rachel stared at the transfer documents with growing horror. My career. My MBA. Everything's ruined. Rachel, you attempted to liquidate $2 million in protected federal assets after conducting unauthorized surveillance of Treasury Department operations. Yes, your career prospects are significantly compromised. But I was trying to help, she protested. Federal prosecutors evaluate criminal actions, not good intentions. The evidence demonstrates sophisticated financial crimes regardless of your motivations. Marcus looked confused. Sarah, are you really a federal agent? Yes, Marcus. I've been investigating money laundering operations while maintaining a cover identity as a freelance financial consultant. Why didn't you tell us? Dad asked. Because undercover operations require complete compartmentalization. Even from family. We're so proud of you, Mom said through her tears. Thank you. But pride doesn't eliminate the criminal charges Rachel faces. Rachel buried her face in her hands. Northwestern MBA, and I'm going to federal prison for financial crimes. Federal prosecutors will make charging decisions based on security assessments and criminal evidence. Your educational background is irrelevant to those calculations. Sarah, please, Dad begged. Isn't there something you can do? Dad, Rachel's actions threatened national security operations targeting international criminal organizations. My personal feelings about family don't override those obligations. But we didn't know. Mom protested. Federal asset protection systems operate regardless of knowledge or family relationships. Unauthorized access triggers criminal penalties automatically. Rachel looked up with desperate hope. What if I withdraw the transfer documents? What if we pretend this never happened? Rachel, Treasury Department algorithms already flagged your activities. Federal investigators are probably reviewing your case right now. Oh God. The screenshots, the analysis, the transfer preparation, everything's documented in federal monitoring systems. You can't withdraw evidence that's already been collected. Dad stood up abruptly. I'm calling our lawyer. Dad, call Attorney General Patricia Morrison's office instead. Tell them you need federal criminal defense for asset protection violations. Asset protection violations? He repeated numbly. Rachel committed serious federal crimes that could result in decades of imprisonment. Family lawyers won't have relevant experience with Treasury Department prosecutions. Rachel started crying. My whole life is over. Rachel, you prepared documents to steal $2 million in protected federal assets. Yes, the consequences are severe. I was trying to help the family. You were committing federal financial crimes. The prosecutors won't care about your intentions. My secure phone buzzed with an incoming message. I glanced at the screen and saw the expected alert. Asset protection breach detected. Report to headquarters immediately for security debriefing. I have to go, I announced, standing from the table. Where? Mom asked frantically. Treasury Department headquarters. My cover's been compromised, so I need reassignment to non-undercover operations. Sarah, wait. Rachel called desperately. Can't you at least try to help me? I turned back to face my family one final time. Rachel, you used unauthorized access to conduct surveillance of federal operations, then prepared documents to steal protected assets. Those are serious crimes regardless of our family relationship. But I'm your sister. And I'm a Treasury Department agent sworn to protect national security. Those obligations don't have sister exceptions. Please. Rachel, federal investigators will contact you within 48 hours. Cooperate completely and hope that your lack of criminal history influences the prosecutor's charging decisions. What should we do? Dad asked desperately. Call the attorney I mentioned. Don't discuss this situation with anyone else. And understand that family loyalty doesn't supersede federal law. I gathered my things and headed toward the door, leaving behind 18 months of careful cover maintenance and a family that finally understood why I'd always been so calm about financial matters. Rachel's MBA had indeed provided valuable education about modern portfolio theory. The lesson about federal asset protection violations would prove even more instructive. Justice operated independently of academic credentials, family relationships, and good intentions. And Treasury Department agents followed security protocols regardless of personal cost. The annual Family Financial Review had achieved unprecedented transparency after all.
Only blood relatives in this photo, my mother-in-law Amanda said, pushing me aside with her hand on my shoulder. Why don't we be useful and take the picture instead? I held the camera, watching as my husband James' family gathered on the grand staircase of their vacation home. This was supposed to be a happy reunion for Amanda's 60th birthday, but once again, I felt like an outsider even after being married to James for 5 years. My name is Olivia, and I'm 32. I was used to Amanda's little ways of leaving me out, but this time felt different. Maybe it was because I had just found out some shocking news that morning, something I hadn't even told James yet. Or maybe I was just tired of trying. Mom, James said from the stairs, Olivia should be in the picture. She's family too. Amanda laughed, sharp and cold. Dear, these photos are for the family history book. We need to keep track of our bloodline. Olivia understands, don't you? I forced a smile, hiding how my hands were shaking. Of course, Amanda. Whatever you think is best. James looked like he wanted to argue, but I gave him a small shake of my head. Not now. We had bigger things to reveal later. As I took their picture, I thought about the DNA test results waiting in my email. I had taken the test months ago, just to learn more about my family since my parents died when I was young. But the results had changed everything. Make sure you get everyone in the frame, Amanda said, fixing her blouse. And try not to shake the camera this time. Last year's pictures were blurry. They weren't blurry. I was a professional photographer, but Amanda always found a way to criticize me. Next to me, my sister-in-law Sophie rolled her eyes. She had married Amanda's nephew and knew exactly what I was going through. Perfect, I said after taking several photos. Would anyone like to check them? I'm sure they're fine, Amanda replied, already walking away. Now let's move to the garden. Blood relatives only, of course. As everyone left, James stayed behind. This is too much, he whispered, holding my hand. We should tell them now. Not yet, I said. Let's wait for dinner. It's her big night. James sighed and kissed my forehead. You're too kind to her, after everything she's done to you. I thought about all the small insults, the way she always introduced me as just James' wife, never by my name. 5 years of trying to fit into her family. The day dragged on with more blood relatives only pictures. Amanda was like a director, making sure everything was perfect. With each click of the camera, my secret felt heavier. Olivia, dear, Amanda called as we went inside for dinner. Since you're not in the photos, you must have plenty of energy left. Help in the kitchen, will you? I saw Sophie give me a sympathetic look as I followed Amanda. The kitchen was already filled with appetizers she had ordered. She would never actually cook for her own party. You can arrange these on plates, he said, barely looking at me. Make them look nice. And be careful with the crystal dishes. They're family heirlooms. Her words made me smile. If only she knew. What's so funny? Amanda asked sharply. Nothing, I said, placing the food on a tray. Just thinking about family heirlooms. She eyed me suspiciously. Yes, well, some things should stay in the family. Blood family, she said firmly. I stayed quiet, letting her words pass. Meanwhile, the DNA test results burned in my mind. James and I had even taken another test to be sure. We needed to be certain before tonight. As I finished, Amanda turned to me again. I've been meaning to talk to you. I sighed. She'd had many talks with me before. James is my only son, she said, pretending to sound kind. And while you've been fine as a wife, I do worry about the future, about our family legacy. The Morgan family name is very important to you, I said carefully. Exactly. She looked pleased. So you understand why these things matter. The photos, the family history, the bloodline. It all must be preserved properly. I thought again about the DNA results. About the truth Amanda didn't know yet. Of course, I said softly. Blood is everything, isn't it? She smiled, thinking I agreed with her. I'm glad you understand. Now let's bring these out to the real family. As she walked out, her perfect hair in place, I couldn't help but smile. In just a few hours, during her birthday dinner, her world of blood relatives only was about to collapse. I picked up a platter, remembering the moment James and I first saw the results. The shock, the laughter, the irony of it all. Sophie peeked into the kitchen. Need help? I can't listen to Amanda's history lesson anymore. Thanks, I said, handing her a tray. Just wait until dinner. The family history is about to get very interesting. The dining room buzzed as everyone found their seats. Amanda, of course, had arranged it so I was far from the core family. I sat at the end of the table next to Sophie and a distant cousin, because even distant blood relatives mattered more to Amanda than a spouse like me. James caught my eye from his seat near his mother and gave me a quick wink. My stomach flipped. The DNA test results were ready on our phones, waiting for the perfect moment. Amanda tapped her wine glass. Before we begin, I'd like to say a few words about family. Sophie leaned over. $10 says she mentions bloodlines in the first sentence. 20 says it's in the first 5 words, I whispered back. Our precious family bloodline, Amanda began. Sophie sighed, slid a 20 under the table, and tried not to laugh. Amanda went on about the importance of the Morgan name, how their family had produced doctors, lawyers, and even a senator. James fidgeted, hand near his phone. I shook my head slightly, not yet. Let her finish. And while we welcome those who marry into our family, Amanda said, barely glancing at me, we must always remember that true bonds come from blood. The first course arrived, giving me a moment to breathe. Amanda continued sharing stories about her perfect family, reminding everyone that she was still collecting photos for the new family history book. Blood relatives only, of course, she added. That was our cue. James cleared his throat. Speaking of family history, Mom, Olivia, and I have something to share. Amanda raised an eyebrow. Oh, are you finally giving me a grandchild? Not exactly, James said, pulling out his phone. Olivia took a DNA test a few months ago. The results were interesting. The room fell silent. Amanda tightened her grip on her wine glass. I don't see how Olivia's DNA has anything to do with our family history. That's where you're wrong, Mom. James stood behind my chair. Show them, honey. I pulled up the email and handed my phone to Sophie. She gasped as she read it. No way, she whispered, looking between me and Amanda. Amanda frowned. What is it? I took a deep breath. According to the DNA test, I'm related to the Morgan family. Directly related. Amanda's face turned pale. That's impossible. Not impossible, James said. Olivia's grandfather, her mom's dad, was a Morgan, your father's brother, the one who disappeared in the 60s. Amanda's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. No one moved. That can't be, she stammered. Uncle Thomas died young. He never had kids. Actually, I said gently. He changed his name and started a new life. He had a daughter, my mom. Which means you and my mom are first cousins, and James and I are second cousins. The room was silent. Around the table, people looked shocked, amused, or unsure what to say. Sophie kept scrolling through the results, her mouth open. We even took a second test to be sure, James added. It's confirmed. Olivia has more Morgan blood than half the people in your pictures today, Mom. Amanda sat frozen. For years, she had treated me like I didn't belong because I wasn't real family, but by her own rules, I was. Sophie finally broke the silence. Well, this definitely needs to go in a family history book. A few people chuckled. Amanda just stared at me, as if seeing me for the first time. The woman who had spent years treating me like an outsider was, in the end, my aunt. The remainder of dinner passed in a blur of whispered conversations and shocked glances. Amanda barely touched her food, her perfect posture slumping slightly as she processed the news. I watched as she periodically shook her head, as if trying to deny the reality before her. After dessert, while others cleared the table, Amanda disappeared into her study. James wanted to follow her, but I stopped him. Let me, I said softly. We need to have this conversation. I found her sitting at her desk, staring at an old photograph. As I approached, I recognized it. A young man in a military uniform, smiling broadly at the camera. That's him, isn't it? I asked quietly. Thomas Morgan. My grandfather. Amanda nodded slowly. He was my favorite uncle. When he disappeared, everyone assumed. We never knew. She looked up at me, her eyes swimming with tears. You have his smile. How did I never notice? I sat down in the chair across from her desk. Life has a funny way of coming full circle, doesn't it? All these years, she whispered, all those things I said about blood relatives, about family legacy. She covered her face with her hands. I've been horrible to you. Yes, you have, I agreed calmly. But now we have a choice. We can either let this revelation tear us further apart, or we can use it to build something new. She lowered her hands, revealing mascara-streaked cheeks. How can you even want to build anything with me after how I've treated you? I reached into my purse and pulled out another document, not a DNA test this time, but a photograph. This is my mom, I said, sliding it across the desk. Your cousin. She died when I was 12, but she always told me that family was about love, not blood. Ironically, it turns out I had both with the Morgans all along. Amanda picked up the photo, her hand trembling. She looks just like Aunt Sarah, she murmured. Thomas's wife. I have more photos, I offered. And stories, if he'd like to hear them. We could add them to the family history book, all of them, not just the blood relatives. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. I'd like that. She paused, then added, I have so much to make up for. Yes, you do, I agreed. But we have time. And now that we know we're family, by blood and by marriage, maybe we can start fresh. The next morning, Amanda called everyone together for another family photo. This time, she positioned me right next to her, in the center of the group. Everyone in, she announced, her voice carrying a new warmth. Blood relatives, spouses, partners, every single person who makes this family whole. Sophie grinned as she set up the camera timer and rushed to join us. No blurry photos this time? Your photos were never blurry, Amanda admitted, surprising everyone. I was just being difficult. You're actually quite talented, Olivia. As the camera flashed, capturing the moment, I felt James squeeze my hand. In that fraction of a second, everything had changed. The walls of exclusion had crumbled, replaced by bridges of understanding. Later, as we helped Amanda organize photos for the family history book, she paused over a picture of James and me on our wedding day. You know, she said thoughtfully, maybe it's time to redefine what we mean by family legacy. I watched as she opened to a fresh page in the book, carefully placing the photo of my grandfather Thomas alongside pictures of his long-lost family. Below it she wrote, family is not just in our blood. It's in our hearts, our choices, and sometimes in the most unexpected discoveries. The Morgan family legacy hadn't been diminished by including everyone. It had been enriched. And somewhere, I like to think my mother and grandfather were smiling at how their family had finally come full circle. As we closed the family history book, now filled with all our stories, Amanda hugged me for the first time in 5 years. Welcome home, she whispered. For real this time. And in that moment, I realized that sometimes the strongest family bonds are forged not just by blood, but by the willingness to open our hearts to new possibilities and to find family in places we never expected to look. Your sister deserves this vacation more than we need a baby. My husband's voice crackled through the phone, attempting to sound confident but betraying a hint of nervousness. I've already transferred our IVF savings to her account. I stood in our kitchen, my hand gripping the counter as I processed his words. The $45,000 we'd spent 3 years saving, the money that represented our hopes and dreams of starting a family, gone. Given to his sister Emma for a luxury European vacation. Perfect, I replied, my voice steady. Thanks for letting me know. There was a pause on the other end. This wasn't the reaction David had expected. He'd been prepared for tears, for anger, for the emotional outburst he'd grown accustomed to dismissing as my baby fever. Instead, he got calm acceptance. Look, Olivia, he started, his tone shifting to the condescending one he perfected over our 8 years of marriage. Emma's been through a rough divorce. She needs this break. We can always save up again for the IVF. You're only 34, there's plenty of time. I looked down at the papers on the counter in front of me, documents I'd received just 2 weeks ago from my doctor. Papers that would have shattered David's convenient narrative about plenty of time. Papers that made his betrayal even more devastating. You're right, I said, surprising myself with how easily the lie came. Emma deserves this. I hope she has a wonderful time. Really? David sounded suspicious now. That's it, no argument? No argument, I confirmed. I need to go, I'm running late for my shift at the hospital. I hung up before he could respond, before the trembling in my hands could reach my voice. As a pediatric nurse, I'd learned to keep my composure in crisis situations. Right now, that training was the only thing keeping me together. 2 weeks ago, my doctor had called me in for a private consultation. The results of my latest fertility tests showed that my condition was deteriorating rapidly. If we wanted to conceive through IVF, we needed to act within the next 3 months. After that, my chances would drop dramatically. I hadn't told David yet. I've been waiting for the right moment, gathering resources, and making plans. Now I realize I've been right to keep it to myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. OMG sis. David told me what he did. You're the best for understanding. Can't wait to post pics from Paris. Love you. I stared at the message, remembering all the times Emma had competed with me for David's attention and resources. The emergencies that always seemed to coincide with our important moments. The way she talked David out of our previous IVF attempt 2 years ago because she needed help with her down payment. Family comes first. She'd insisted, while David nodded along. My hands stopped shaking. A strange calm settled over me as pieces clicked into place. All those years of playing second fiddle to Emma's needs, of watching David prioritize his sister's whims over our future, they'd been leading to this moment. I opened my laptop and logged into our joint account. As expected, David had cleaned it out. All our careful saving, the extra shifts I picked up, the bonuses I contributed, transferred to Emma's account that morning. What David didn't know was that I'd seen this coming. 6 months ago, after Emma's divorce, I'd watched her eyeing our savings with that familiar calculating look. I'd started preparing then, opening a separate account at a different bank. Every extra shift, every bonus for the past 6 months had gone there instead of our joint account. I even sold some of my jewelry, pieces David had never noticed anyway. The joint account he'd emptied, it contained exactly what I'd calculated Emma might convince him to take. The real IVF fund was safe, along with something else David had forgotten about, proof of every penny I contributed to our joint savings, documented meticulously over the years. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Dr. Torres, my fertility specialist. Appointment confirmed for next week. All paperwork ready as discussed. I took a deep breath and began gathering what I needed. 8 years of marriage had taught me a lot about David and Emma's pattern of behavior. Now it was time to put that knowledge to use. As I prepared for my shift at the hospital, I thought about all the times David had dismissed my concerns about his sister's influence. You're being paranoid, he'd say. Emma's family. Well, he was right about one thing. Family does come first. As I walked through the hospital corridors during my shift, memories of the past 8 years played through my mind like a movie reel. Each scene revealed a pattern I'd been too loyal, too trusting to acknowledge. The time David postponed our honeymoon because Emma had a crisis with her then-husband. The anniversary he missed because Emma needed help moving. Every milestone in our marriage seemed to have Emma's shadow looming over it. Olivia. Sarah, my colleague at the pediatric ward, called out, "Everything okay? You seem distracted." I managed a small smile. David gave our IVF savings to Emma for her vacation fund. Sarah's face went through a range of emotions: shock, anger, and finally, understanding. She was one of the few people who knew about my separate account and my contingency plans. "So it finally happened," she said quietly, pulling me into the break room. "What are you going to do?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the email I'd received that morning from my lawyer. "Remember Jake Harrison, the attorney whose daughter I helped through chemo last year?" Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning the email. "He's agreed to take your case. Pro bono," I confirmed. "He says given the documentation I have, plus David's latest stunt, we have a strong case for financial misconduct during marriage." "Does David know you've been documenting everything?" I shook my head. He never paid attention to the financial stuff. Too busy managing Emma's life to notice what was happening in his own home. My phone buzzed with another text from Emma. "Just booked first-class tickets. This is going to be amazing. Thanks again for being so understanding." Sarah read the message over my shoulder and scoffed. "She's really rubbing it in, isn't she?" "Let her," I replied, my voice steady. "Every message, every post, every font is just more evidence." During my lunch break, I called Dr. Torres to confirm the details of our plan. As one of the top fertility specialists in the state, she had connections with several clinics that offered financing options. Between my separate savings and their program, we could proceed with the IVF as planned. "Are you sure you want to do this alone?" she asked gently. "I'm sure," I replied. "I've spent 8 years waiting for David to choose our family over his sister's demands. I'm done waiting." When I got home that evening, David was waiting. He had that familiar look, the one that meant Emma had convinced him he was right and I was being unreasonable. "Emma's so excited about the trip," he started, as if we were discussing something as trivial as dinner plans. "She's already planned the whole itinerary. Paris, Rome, Barcelona." "Sounds wonderful," I said, heading to the kitchen to start dinner. "I'm sure she'll have an amazing time." He followed me, thrown off by my continued calm. "Look, I know you're probably upset deep down, but Emma needs this. After everything with her ex-husband." "David," I interrupted, turning to face him. "I said it was fine. What more do you want from me?" He stood there, mouth slightly open, clearly unprepared for this version of me. The version that wasn't begging for explanations or fighting for his attention. I just want you to understand," he stammered. "I understand perfectly," I replied, my voice level. "Now I have an early shift tomorrow, so I'm going to head to bed early." As I lay in bed that night, listening to David watching TV downstairs, I thought about the appointment scheduled with Jake Harrison for tomorrow. About the file of evidence I collected over the years. About the IVF procedure scheduled for next month. David had made his choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. My phone lit up with one last text from Emma. "Just bought the cutest outfits for my trip. Can't wait to post all the pics. You're seriously the best sister-in-law ever." I smiled in the darkness, thinking about how different things would look in just a few weeks. Emma had no idea she was documenting her own downfall, one gleeful post at a time. Tomorrow would be the first step toward my new future. With or without David, I was going to have the family I always dreamed of. And no one, not even his precious sister, would stand in my way this time. The next morning, I met with Jake Harrison in his office downtown. The space was warm and professional, much like Jake himself. He spread out the documents I provided on his mahogany desk, nodding as he reviewed them. "This is thorough," he said, picking up the detailed record of my contributions to the joint account. "Most people don't think to document everything so carefully." 8 years of watching my savings disappear into Emma's emergencies taught me to keep receipts, I replied. Jake leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "The transfer to Emma's account yesterday, that's what we call the smoking gun. It shows a clear pattern of financial misconduct and misuse of marital assets." I pulled out my phone, showing him Emma's latest social media posts. Designer shopping sprees, first-class ticket confirmations, luxury hotel bookings, all paid for with our IVF fund. She's not exactly being subtle about it, Jake observed, taking screenshots. This actually works in our favor. Have you told David about your medical situation? I shook my head. Not yet. I wanted to secure my position first. Smart, he nodded. Given the time-sensitive nature of your condition and the fact that he gave away funds specifically saved for medical treatment, we can request an emergency hearing. As Jake outlined our strategy, my phone buzzed with a text from David. Emma's so happy. I knew you'd understand once you had time to think about it. You're amazing, babe. I showed the message to Jake, who added it to our growing file. He's building our case for us, he mused. Does he have any idea you're here? No, I replied. He thinks I'm at work. I took a personal day. Good. I'd like to file everything today. The sooner we move, the better our position. Jake gathered the papers into a folder. Are you ready for what comes next? Once we file, there's no going back. I thought about the years of putting my dreams on hold, of watching David consistently choose his sister's wants over our needs. I'm ready. That afternoon, while David was at work, I went to the bank and closed our joint credit cards. Jake had advised me to protect myself financially before the paperwork was served. I also withdrew my portion of our remaining joint savings, a measly $3,000 that Emma hadn't managed to convince David to share. When I got home, there was a package waiting on the doorstep. Inside was a framed photo of Emma with a note. For your living room, so you can see how amazing the money was spent. Love you. The audacity might have hurt once. Now it just strengthened my resolve. I was preparing dinner when David came home, whistling. He stopped short when he saw me calmly setting the table for one. Where's my plate? He asked, confusion evident in his voice. I think you should eat at Emma's tonight, I replied evenly. She'll probably want to show you all her new purchases. Are you angry? He seemed genuinely puzzled. I thought you were okay with this. I'm not angry, David. I'm done. I placed a manila envelope on the table. You've been served. His face went from confusion to shock as he opened the envelope. Divorce papers? This is ridiculous. All this over Emma's vacation? No, I said quietly. This is about 8 years of watching you choose your sister over our marriage. The vacation fund was just the final straw. You're overreacting, he sputtered. We can save up again for the IVF. Actually, we can't. I handed him the medical documents I'd been keeping to myself. I needed that treatment within the next 3 months. But don't worry, I'm still getting it. Just not with you. The color draining from his face as he read the doctor's report. Why didn't you tell me? Would it have mattered? I asked. Would you have said no to Emma? His silence was all the answer I needed. I have an IVF appointment next month, I told him. I'm doing it on my own, with my own money you and Emma can't touch. I suggest you start looking for a place to stay. Your sister has plenty of room, I hear. Olivia, please, he started, but I cut him off. Check your credit cards before you leave. They're closed. And don't bother checking the joint account. I've withdrawn my portion. You can keep the rest, though I suspect Emma's already got plans for it. As David stood there, stunned and speechless, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. 8 years of compromising, of coming second, of watching my dreams slip away. It was finally over. And my new beginning was just around the corner. 2 months later, I sat in Dr. Torres' office, staring at the ultrasound screen with tears in my eyes. Against all odds, the first round of IVF had been successful. I was pregnant. Congratulations, Dr. Torres smiled warmly. Your numbers look excellent. I'd say all that careful planning paid off. As I left the clinic clutching my ultrasound photos, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my lawyer. Final divorce hearing scheduled for next week. Emma's vacation posts have been invaluable evidence. Emma's European adventure had turned into a social media spectacle. Designer shopping sprees, luxury hotels, champagne-soaked yacht parties, all meticulously documented on Instagram. Each post had been carefully added to our court documentation, proving exactly where our IVF savings had gone. David's attempts to justify the situation had grown increasingly desperate. Emma needed this break, he'd argued during mediation. It was a mental health necessity. The mediator had been unimpressed, especially when presented with Emma's social media feed. Mental health necessity, she questioned, looking at photos of Emma partying in St. Tropez. This looks more like reckless spending of marital assets. I pulled into my new apartment complex, a cozy place closer to the hospital where I worked. Sarah was waiting outside with a care package. "Well?" she asked eagerly as I approached. Wordlessly, I handed her the ultrasound photo. Her squeal of delight echoed across the parking lot. "I'm going to be an aunt," she exclaimed, hugging me tight. "Have you told anyone else yet?" "Just you," I replied. "I'm waiting until after the divorce is finalized next week." Inside over tea, Sarah updated me on the latest gossip. Emma had returned from Europe to find her own financial situation in shambles. The vacation had burned through not just our IVF money, but her own savings as well. She tried to hit David up for more money, Sarah reported, but apparently his accounts are all frozen pending the divorce settlement. I sipped my tea, thinking about the irony. How did he respond? From what I heard, he finally said no to her. First time for everything, I guess. The day of the final hearing arrived bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a conservative navy suit, the slight swell of my pregnancy still barely visible beneath the jacket. David and Emma were both there, looking considerably less polished than in their recent social media posts. Emma's designer vacation wardrobe couldn't hide the panic in her eyes as our lawyer presented the financial evidence. The judge was particularly interested in the timing, how the money had been taken just when it was most crucial for medical treatment. "Mr. Mitchell," she addressed David, "you deliberately misappropriated funds that were saved for time-sensitive medical treatment, giving them to your sister for a luxury vacation. Do you understand the severity of this action?" David's response was quiet. "I didn't know about the time sensitivity. Because you never asked," I interjected softly. "You never asked about anything that didn't involve Emma." The judge's ruling was decisive. Given the documented financial misconduct and the medical circumstances, I was awarded a significant portion of our assets. Emma was ordered to repay her portion of the misappropriated funds, though we all knew that was unlikely to happen. As we left the courthouse, David tried to approach me one last time. "Olivia," he called out, "I'm sorry. I know now what I did was wrong. Maybe we could." I turned to face him, my hand instinctively resting on my stomach. His eyes widened as he noticed the gesture, realization dawning on his face. "You're?" "Yes," I said simply. "I am, and this baby will grow up knowing that they were wanted, planned for, and chosen first. Always." I walked away without looking back, leaving David standing there with Emma, who was already complaining about the repayment order. 6 months later, as I sat in my newly decorated nursery, I received a final text from David. "I understand now what I lost. I hope you and the baby have the life you deserve." I looked around the peaceful room at the life I built for myself and my growing baby and smiled. We already did. Sarah brought over dinner that evening, and as we sat talking about the future, about baby names and nursery colors and all the joy ahead, I felt complete. The path hadn't been what I expected, but it had led me exactly where I needed to be. My hand rested on my growing belly, feeling the baby kick. "We're going to be just fine, little one," I whispered. Just fine indeed. And we were.